that movie. Now, here with the review for Richard III, the 1995 Shakespearean adaptation starring Ian Mackellen, Annette Bening, Jim Broadbent, and Robert Downey Jr. Based on the play by famous English writer William Shakespeare, who in turn based on the real-life king who ruled England in the late 1400s, the story follows Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who has been deformed since birth, but has managed to work his way up to great military glory and is a main fixture of the York family. However, when the Yorks finally regain control of England, Richard begins a path of murder, kidnap, and betrayal in his efforts to become the new king of England. Now, as many of you have probably guessed or already know, this is not the Richard III of, say, Basil Rathbone or Laurence Olivier. This is not set in the medieval era. This is instead an update to the 1930s. And you know what? It works fantastically. Obviously, the whole thing is an allegory to Hitler, right down to the flags, which basically they substituted the swastika for the head of a boar. But apart from that, everything is it's got undertones of Nazi Germany throughout, with Henry ultimately becoming the resistance fighter against the oppressive reign of Richard. And for the most part, it works fantastically. The action scenes are shot very well. It feels very much like the 1930s. It's fantasy, but at the same time, it feels like a very real 1930s. It feels like what would have happened if the fascists, say Lord Haw-Haw, had actually managed to take over England. This is what it would look like. But like any other film, now onto the performances. Ian Mackellen is absolutely fantastic as Richard. And it's small wonder, since this is the guy who would later go on to play Magneto, and you can very much see the beginnings of that here. He plays the role very menacing and sinister, but he gives it a certain British charm, which makes Richard strangely likable, even though he does a lot of horrible things throughout the movie. The rest of the cast is, of course, full of ensemble players. Jim Broadbent, Robert Downey Jr., Nigel Hawthorne, John Wood, Maggie Smith, all do fantastic jobs with their roles. And in all honesty, even though the kid actors were a little bit annoying at points as the princes and the son of Lord Stanley, they weren't too big of a deal. They didn't appear much in the film, and we were able, thankfully, to focus completely in on Mackellen. But now for the question that's probably on everybody's mind. How faithful is it to the Richard III play? Well, unfortunately, much like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, I haven't read the actual material, so I can't really tell you that. But from what I've been able to read up on, it cuts the text in half. Since this is 100 minutes, and therefore I assume that the play would run for nearly 3 hours, if not more, unedited. So, if you're a purist who believes that the text should be all there, then you might be disappointed. But in all fairness, the cut-up doesn't affect the film that much. Where they cut, it made story sense. It didn't feel like a jump cut, like the director just said, "Oh my god, we have too much text here, we've got to cut." Here, it's done very artistically, and you barely notice, and I'm pretty sure even the Shakespearean nuts will not really mind that much where the text has been cut, since all the main plot points and notes and famous lines are here. So, and also this was intended to be a new revision or adaptation of the story, and it fits very well, the fact that this doesn't drag out for 3 hours, but instead runs at a very brisk 100 minutes, and I think those are all pluses to the film, since people who think of Shakespeare as dusty and long and boring might want to look this one up, as I said, due to its runtime. In conclusion, I will give Richard III a silver star. I would give it a go, but I can understand that some people may not like it because, as many of you guessed, this is a much darker story than, say, your Romeo and Juliet's or your Much Ado About Nothings. Also, I understand that people may not like the film for having basically trimmed down the text so much. However, that still can't deny the fact that it is still a great film. Everything about the film is good. The design is good, the acting is great, particularly from Mackellen, and the design is very much a dark, almost alternate universe of what would have happened if Nazis had come to Britain. If you're a newbie who, as I said before, if you're a newbie who thinks that Shakespeare is old and boring, I suggest you check this film out, and I think you will be very, very pleased.